Police car lights, soulmate, breaking news. They were ready to move on. Until something suddenly reminded them of you. My beloved child, stop scrolling for just a moment, because what you are about to hear may touch a place inside your heart that you have been trying to protect for a very long time. There was a moment when your soulmate convinced themselves that they were finally ready to move on. They told themselves that the memories were fading. They told themselves that the connection was over. They tried to continue their life as though you had never entered it. They tried to smile, to stay busy, to meet people, to focus on other things, and to silence the questions that kept returning whenever the world became quiet. But something happened. Something unexpectedly reminded them of you. And that single moment reopened emotions they thought they had buried. My beloved child, they were not prepared for what they felt. They were not prepared for the memories that came rushing back. They were not prepared for the realization that moving forward is not always the same thing as moving on. And most importantly, they were not prepared to discover that after everything they had done to distance themselves from you, a part of their heart was still standing exactly where you left it. Listen carefully, because this message is not about forcing a person to return. It is not about chasing someone, begging someone, or putting your life on hold. This message is about understanding a powerful emotional shift that may be taking place behind the scenes. Sometimes the person who walks away believes distance will make the feelings disappear. Sometimes silence feels easier than honesty. Sometimes pride becomes stronger than vulnerability. Sometimes a person convinces themselves that they made the right decision simply because admitting regret would require them to face everything they avoided. But then comes that unexpected reminder. A song. A place. A familiar phrase. A photograph. A scent. A passing conversation. A date on the calendar. A dream in the middle of the night. Something small enough for everyone else to ignore, yet powerful enough to stop them in their tracks. And suddenly, my beloved child, your soulmate is remembering not just your face, but how they felt when they were with you. They remember the way you listened. They remember the way you cared. They remember conversations that seemed ordinary at the time but now feel priceless. They remember moments they once took for granted. They remember your patience. They remember your presence. They remember the comfort they felt around you. And perhaps most painfully, they remember the moments when they hurt you and acted as though it did not matter. That is where the emotional battle begins. Because remembering you is one thing. Admitting what they lost is another. My beloved child, there is a difference between missing someone and being ready to change. There is a difference between remembering a beautiful connection and being willing to take responsibility for what happened. So do not let this message convince you that you must sit by your phone waiting for a message. Do not let it make you chase signs. Do not let uncertainty steal your peace. Instead, listen with an open heart and remember this. If someone truly belongs in your future, their actions must eventually speak louder than their memories. And right now, something inside this person may be forcing them to confront a truth they desperately tried to avoid. They thought they could move forward without looking back. They thought time would erase the emotional imprint you left behind. They thought they could replace the connection with distractions. But then life placed a reminder of you directly in front of them. And suddenly everything became complicated. My beloved child, imagine them going through an ordinary day. Nothing special. Nothing dramatic. They wake up, get ready, handle their responsibilities, talk to people, perhaps laugh at something, perhaps continue with their normal routine. From the outside, everything appears fine. Nobody would suspect what is happening inside their mind. Then something catches their attention. Maybe it is a song that once belonged to a chapter of your story together. Maybe they hear words that you used to say. Maybe they pass somewhere that carries a memory. Maybe someone unknowingly mentions something connected to you. And for a moment, their entire emotional world pauses. They may try to ignore it. They may tell themselves, it means nothing. They may change the subject. They may keep walking. But the memory does not disappear. Instead, another memory follows it. Then another. Suddenly they are remembering the beginning. They remember how they first noticed you. They remember the first meaningful conversation. They remember the excitement. They remember the uncertainty. They remember the moments when their hearts started becoming attached before their mind was ready to admit it. They remember the closeness. They remember the laughter. They remember the moments of silence that somehow felt comfortable. They remember the things you did without expecting anything in return. And then they remember the ending. That is the part they have tried hardest to avoid. Because the ending contains questions. Why did they pull away? Why did they become distant? Why did they say certain things? Why did they choose silence when communication was needed? Why did they allow pride, fear, confusion, or circumstances to become stronger than their feelings? And perhaps the biggest question of all. What if I had handled everything differently? My beloved child, that question can be incredibly powerful. A person can avoid another person, but they cannot always avoid their own conscience. They can delete messages, but they cannot delete memories. They can stop looking at photographs, but they cannot always stop the emotions attached to those photographs. They can pretend they are unaffected, but eventually life has a way of bringing unfinished emotions back to the surface. And this is where your soulmate may be right now, confronting unfinished emotions. Not necessarily because they suddenly have everything figured out, but because something reminded them of you strongly enough that their carefully constructed emotional wall cracked. They may have believed they were completely over you. They may even have told other people that they had moved on. They may have acted confident. They may have convinced themselves that the chapter was closed. But one reminder can expose the difference between what someone says and what they actually feel. My beloved child, sometimes the heart speaks most loudly when the world becomes quiet. During the day, a person can stay distracted. At night, distractions disappear. That is when memories become louder. That is when questions become heavier. That is when the person who was avoided becomes the person they cannot stop thinking about. Perhaps your soulmate has experienced nights like this. They lie down expecting sleep, but their mind starts replaying moments. They wonder what you are doing. They wonder whether you still remember them. They wonder whether you have moved on. They wonder whether you would even listen if they reached out. They wonder whether they have lost their opportunity forever. And then fear enters. What if you no longer care? What if you have healed? What if you have become stronger? What if someone else is now giving you the love they once had the chance to give? These questions can create a completely different emotional reality inside someone. Suddenly, the person who thought they had control begins to realize they may no longer control the outcome. My beloved child, this is why you must not chase. Your silence can sometimes give another person the space to hear their own thoughts. Your healing can sometimes make someone realize how much they took for granted. Your decision to continue living can sometimes reveal that your life does not stop simply because someone walked away. And if this person is truly meant to return, let them return with clarity. Let them return with accountability. Let them return with genuine intention. Let them return because they have learned something, not simply because they are lonely. There is a major difference. Loneliness can make someone miss your presence. Growth can make someone understand your value. Nostalgia can make someone remember the good times. Maturity can make someone understand why the connection mattered. Regret can make someone wish they could rewrite the past. Responsibility can make them willing to create a better future. My beloved child, you deserve the last one. You deserve something real. You deserve someone who does not disappear when emotions become difficult. You deserve someone who can communicate. You deserve someone who can admit when they are wrong. You deserve someone who does not make you constantly question where you stand. So listen to this message as encouragement, not as a command to wait. Your life is moving forward regardless of what this person chooses. And perhaps that is exactly what they are beginning to notice. You are no longer the same person they remember. You have endured things. You have learned things. You have grown. You have become stronger through pain that nobody else fully understood. And maybe the person who walked away is beginning to realize that the version of you they left behind may no longer exist. They may be wondering whether they still have access to your heart. They may be wondering whether you would recognize the person they have become. They may be wondering whether they deserve another opportunity. These questions can create an internal battle. One part of them says, reach out. Another says, stay away. One part says, tell the truth. Another says, protect your pride. One part says, you miss them. Another says, you should have moved on by now. This emotional conflict can be exhausting. And the reminder of you may have intensified it. Perhaps they had been doing well for weeks or months. Then suddenly they saw something that reminded them of you, and the emotions returned stronger than expected. They may have thought, why am I still affected by this? They may have become frustrated with themselves. They may have tried to distract themselves again. But the harder they tried not to think about you, the more they thought about you. That is how unresolved emotion often works. You cannot always force it away. You can only eventually face it. My beloved child, maybe this person is finally facing it. Maybe they are asking themselves questions they avoided before. Maybe they are realizing that their decision was influenced by fear rather than certainty. Maybe they are realizing that they confused distance with healing. Maybe they are realizing that the problem was not a lack of feelings but a lack of emotional readiness. Maybe they are recognizing that they hurt someone who genuinely cared for them. And perhaps that recognition is painful. Because regret does not simply say, I miss you. Regret says, I wish I had understood sooner. Regret says, I wish I had spoken when I remained silent. Regret says, I wish I had protected what mattered instead of assuming it would always be there. And when someone reaches that realization, they may begin thinking about contact. But thinking about contact is not the same as making contact. Fear can still stop them. They may type a message and delete it. They may open your profile and close it. They may look at an old conversation. They may write something in their notes. They may rehearse what they would say. They may imagine how you would respond. They may wonder whether you would be angry. They may fear rejection. They may fear embarrassment. They may fear that you have moved on. My beloved child, if you are waiting for some dramatic sign, remember that real life is often quieter than the stories we imagine. Sometimes the biggest emotional shift happens inside a person long before it becomes visible outside. A person can change internally before they ever send a message. A person can realize something before they know how to express it. A person can miss you without knowing whether they should return. So do not measure your worth by the speed of someone else's actions. Your worth was never determined by whether they stayed. Your worth was never determined by whether they chose you at the right time. Your worth existed before they met you, during the connection, after the separation, and regardless of what happens next. My beloved child, there is something else you need to understand. The reminder of you may not simply remind them of the good memories. It may also remind them of the version of themselves they were when they were with you. Perhaps they felt more open. Perhaps they laughed more. Perhaps they dreamed bigger. Perhaps they felt understood. Perhaps they were able to express parts of themselves they normally kept hidden. Sometimes we do not miss only the person. We miss who we became around that person. That can be incredibly powerful. Your soulmate may be realizing that being with you brought something out of them that they have not been able to recreate elsewhere. And that realization can make the absence feel much heavier. They may compare new conversations to old conversations. They may compare superficial connections to the depth they once experienced. They may discover that attention is not the same as emotional connection. They may discover that chemistry is not the same as emotional safety. They may discover that being around people is not the same as feeling understood. And suddenly, memories of you become more meaningful. My beloved child, this is why I want you to protect your peace. If someone is remembering you, let them remember. If someone is missing you, let them miss you. If someone is questioning their choices, let them question them. You do not need to interrupt the process. You do not need to send a message just to remind them that you exist. They know you exist. The memory itself proves that. What matters now is whether they are capable of turning realization into action. Because anyone can miss someone. Anyone can feel nostalgic. Anyone can regret something at midnight. But genuine love requires courage during daylight. It requires communication. It requires consistency. It requires accountability. It requires showing up when things are uncomfortable. So if this person eventually comes back, do not only listen to their words. Watch their behavior. Listen to their explanation, but observe their consistency. Hear their apology, but notice whether they have changed. Pay attention to whether they respect your boundaries. Pay attention to whether they are clear about their intentions. You have already experienced confusion. You do not need another chapter of confusion disguised as romance. My beloved child, you have been through enough uncertainty. You deserve clarity. And perhaps that is exactly what your soulmate is beginning to understand. Maybe they are realizing that the connection did not fail because there were no feelings. Maybe it failed because feelings alone were not enough to overcome fear, timing, immaturity, circumstances, or poor communication. And now, with distance, they can see the situation differently. Distance can change perspective. When someone is close to a situation, they may react emotionally. When they step away, they sometimes gain clarity. They may begin to see your side. They may understand why you were hurt. They may understand why you stopped chasing. They may realize that your silence was not punishment. It was exhaustion. You were tired of carrying something that should have been carried by two people. And that realization can hit hard. Maybe they thought you would always be there. Maybe they assumed you would eventually reach out again. Maybe they expected you to keep the door open indefinitely. But when you stopped trying, they were forced to confront reality. You were not going to chase forever. You were not going to keep proving your love to someone who refused to meet you halfway. And now they may be wondering whether the opportunity has passed. My beloved child, sometimes the fear of losing someone permanently creates a level of honesty that temporary distance never could. When a person believes they can return whenever they want, urgency does not exist. But when they realize the other person is genuinely moving forward, urgency appears. They begin thinking about the future. They begin imagining what it would feel like if you were no longer available emotionally. They begin imagining seeing you happy with someone else. They begin imagining birthdays, holidays, milestones, and ordinary moments without you. And sometimes that imagined future hurts more than the actual separation. Because now they are not simply missing the past. They are grieving a future they once assumed might happen. My beloved child, that is a profound realization. Perhaps they once imagined you would eventually reconnect. Perhaps they believed there would always be another chance. But now they may be recognizing that time does not guarantee opportunities. People grow. Circumstances change. Hearts heal. And sometimes the person you once knew becomes someone you can no longer reach. That possibility can awaken courage. It can also awaken fear. They may ask themselves, should I finally say what I feel? And then they may remember every reason they were afraid before. Maybe they fear rejection. Maybe they fear judgment. Maybe they fear you will remind them of their mistakes. Maybe they fear that you will say no. But beneath all those fears is something even deeper. They fear discovering that they lost you because they were too afraid to love you properly. My beloved child, if that is what they are confronting, allow them to confront it. You cannot do their emotional work for them. You cannot heal their fear for them. You cannot make them brave. You cannot make them communicate. You cannot make them choose you. What you can do is continue choosing yourself. Continue building your life. Continue becoming the person you are proud to be. Continue protecting your heart without closing it completely. Continue believing that what is meant for you will not require you to abandon yourself. And if they return, meet them from a place of strength rather than desperation. Let them see that you have grown. Let them understand that returning to you means entering a different chapter, not reopening the old one. The old patterns cannot simply be repeated. If there is to be a reunion, something must change. My beloved child, perhaps that is the real reason this reminder appeared at this particular moment. It may not be about immediately bringing two people together. It may be about bringing awareness. Awareness of what was lost. Awareness of what mattered. Awareness of what needs healing. Awareness of what must be different if two people ever try again. And that is why you should not obsess over exactly when they will contact you. Focus instead on what kind of relationship you would accept if they did. Would you accept inconsistency? Would you accept secrecy? Would you accept emotional distance? Would you accept being an option? Or would you require honesty, effort, respect, communication, and commitment? My beloved child, know your answer before the moment comes. Because when emotions return suddenly, people can forget the lessons they learned during pain. Do not let nostalgia erase wisdom. You can love someone and still require better treatment. You can miss someone and still maintain boundaries. You can forgive someone and still refuse to repeat the same pattern. You can believe in a connection and still choose your own peace. That is not coldness. That is maturity. And perhaps your soulmate is beginning.